Why is it that everyone in Middle-earth just has this ability to effortlessly roll their R's? Everyone can do it, except for me, because I sound like I have a swollen tongue when I try to say the words like Sauron. I can say Sauron, Sauron. Or Numenor, Sauron. This is such a stupid opening.
Elves have forests to protect. Dwarfs their mines. Men their fields of grain. But we Harfoots have each other.
For I must now wander this wandering day.
We're safe.
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to my channel and time for another episode of Luke's TV Reviews. On today's video, now I know it's a few weeks out, just a little bit, but Amazon Prime finally released one of the most anticipated television shows of all time. And not just one of the most anticipated, one of the most expensive as well. But did this trip back to Middle-earth end up paying off? Or are we all now going to want to cancel our Amazon Prime subscriptions? Find out in my review of Season 1 of The Lord of the Rings of Power. Around 3,000 years before Frodo Baggins begins his journey to save Middle-earth, The Rings of Power depicts a very different Middle-earth, one before the reign of terror of the Dark Lord Sauron. There's many storylines operating at once here. On one side of the world is Galadriel, on a determined hunt to find Sauron at any cost, even if it means defying the wishes of her elven elders. Elrond reunites with his old dwarven friend Durin in the hopes of finding something to save the elven race. We also meet Harfoots, one of whom encounters a mysterious and somewhat magical stranger. Not to mention, there's also a band of humans in the Southlands that soon become the target for a ragtag group of orcs set on seeing in the return of Lord Sauron. As always, spoiler warning, this review is going to be completely spoilerific, talking about everything from the show, including the finale. Amazon threw $1 billion to make this show. Not even the whole show, just this one season. Take that in for a second. As a budget, they spent $1 billion. That would roughly equate to each episode costing about $125 million. Now, in no way should the amount of money you spend on a project be indicative of its quality, but that's a lot of wonga. So therefore, everyone was expecting big things from this show, myself included. However, I was very trepidatious about going into this, mostly due to the fact that this is an entirely original story. Well, it's original-ish. It's based around certain moments of lore within Tolkien's world that he built, but as far as the actual intrinsic story elements, yes, it is mostly original, which is a big ask from this expansive universe. Not to mention the showrunners, Patrick McKay and John D. Payne's only credit before this was Star Trek Beyond. Now, Star Trek Beyond was great, but to basically hand $1 billion to two relative newcomers and give them the keys to one of the most beloved properties on planet Earth. Now, either they had to have put in one hell of a pitch to Amazon, or Amazon were just so desperate to produce something within the Lord of the Rings universe that they were willing to hire whoever. Well, how did it turn out? Let's start with the good, and comfortably, the show looks like it costs $1 billion. It is an exquisite looking television show. The effects are leaps and bounds beyond anything we've seen from TV, even Game of Thrones. I know everyone sets that bar, but also to some films, this show looks incredible. Even down to like the precise details of the clothing and the set design. They truly have pulled off a blinder with the visuals here. The clarity and spectacle of Middle-earth just simply hasn't been done on this scale before, even when I'm talking about the Peter Jackson films. Of course, those films are superior in every conceivable way, but in terms of spectacle, this is a much larger show, especially in terms of what they have planned over what I think they said is about a 5-season arc. And it is quite fun to play around in this sandbox of not necessarily knowing the elements of the plot, and we know where the show will inevitably end up, but it's just interesting to learn the journey about getting there. There are also a number of characters that I really found quite fascinating. The best example of this was Elrond and Durin. Their relationship was a driving force behind me tuning in every week. Robert Aramayo and Owain Arthur as Elrond and Durin respectively share the most endearing of friendship, both actors showcasing their incredible chemistry, making their tussles and eventual departure all the more upsetting. I also didn't mind the little excursions that we had with the half-thirds. Admittedly, I was not on board with it to begin with. But as the bond between Nori and the stranger grew, and especially after Poppy Proudfellow sang her song midway through the season, I became more and more invested in the Harfoots and figuring out the identity of this stranger. Now, it was way too obvious for him to be Sauron. That was like a red herring that they threw right at you in, I think, the first episode, and then you had the freaky looking kids that were following him, making you think that he was Sauron. It was way too obvious. But now, am I correct? I'm calling on some Lord of the Rings fans here. Am I correct in thinking that this is meant to be Gandalf? Seems like Gandalf. Can someone smarter than me let me know in the comments, please? Also, how can I forget the music? It is clear in both past human history and whatever may lie in the future that no one will ever produce a score that is more perfect for Lord of the Rings than Howard Shore. But Bear McCreary does a good job with music that ranges from angelic etherealism to the thumping and eerie cries of battle. This was such a good merge and made just the world feel even more alive. So that's the good, and some of that good is great, and some of the bad is substantially bad. To be blunt, the way that the Rings of Power behaved over the course of these 8 episodes led me to believe that they had no idea what they wanted to do. I believe wholeheartedly that the showrunners knew where they wanted to take the season. I believe wholeheartedly that the showrunners did know where they wanted to take the season, and most importantly of all, end the season to tease what is to come in the future. But the actual process of getting to that point frequently was a mess. I don't wish to sound mean-spirited here, but ultimately I think the weight of this universe and the weight of the property that they're working with here really just did not sit comfortably on the shoulders of 2 relatively inexperienced showrunners. Of course, there are some recognizable names in there, J.A. Bayona for instance, but even then I feel like there are just conflicting visions about what each person wanted their episode to be, and that just as a whole does not make for a good season. Some episodes got their act together, ensured there was progress to the plot, development with some of the characters, and could entertain audiences in the process, whilst other episodes actively did the opposite, presenting stale, uninteresting characters who occupy so much of the screen time without allowing the audience to know anything about them. And that's like a cardinal sin when it comes to making television, because you're basically asking your audience to dedicate an hour of their time on a weekly basis on a character that they just cannot empathize with. Characters like Bronwyn, Theo, and Arondir. Besides a potential romance between Bronwyn and Arondir, these characters are given nothing to do, and yet are perhaps given the most screen time. And it doesn't help the actors either, because the performances come off stale and flat, which unfortunately they do here. As for Galadriel, a character who has received the brunt of much of the criticism of this show, I didn't mind Morfydd Clark's interpretation, nor did I mind her badass battle skills. What I did mind was how cold and callous she was, and it wasn't ever treated like it was a hurdle for her to overcome, because it was simply her sole overriding personality, an almost insurmountable obstacle for the audience to try and overcome, seeing as she is the closest thing this show has to a lead. Her arc was fine, but given the massive reveal at the end of the show, as Halbrand is actually revealed to be Sauron, this arc simply being fine is criminally underwhelming. And let's talk about Sauron for a second. We've always known that he was a normal looking being before becoming that flaming eye, and even before owning the most goth looking suit of armor imaginable. But there was something about his reveal and seeing him just look human that took away from the evil of Sauron. The sense of mystery and secrets was what made him so compelling, and now it's just that he looks like any bloke from down the town. The Rings of Power still has a big journey ahead of it, and this first season was the equivalent of it getting lost for a while until eventually ending up on the right track by the finale. It's got a lot going for it, from the visuals to some endearing characters, but going forward now, it seriously needs to make us care for this ensemble entirely, especially as the stakes increase, because at that point, it could well and truly be a lost cause if you are not committed to these characters. I'm down for a second season, but the show desperately needs to pull its socks up and stop dragging its heels. I'm going to give Season 1 of Lord of the Rings of Power a 6 out of 10. Anyway guys, those were my thoughts on Season 1 of Lord of the Rings of Power. Let me know, have you had a chance to watch all of the show yet? What did you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And my question to you, a very simple one, who was your favourite character from the Rings of Power? For me, given his arc and Owain Arthur's performance, I'm going to go with Durin. But that is all we have time for here today, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button, and if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.